Alright, so we're going to look at a game from the U Memorial in 1994. It's Garry Kasparov with white, Nigel Short with black. These guys had a fierce rivalry in the early 90s. They didn't really like each other very much, talked a lot of smack in interviews. And so this game was pretty cool. You know, Kasparov, he plays e4, and Nigel Short has played the French for a long time. And so no surprise here, Kasparov with knight c3. Pushing e5. This is still a topical line today. You can see Hikaru Nakamura playing this with black, Magnus Carlsen with white, Karyakin with white, I think Morezovich, Ivanchuk with black as well. So anyway, you see this a lot with this f4 here, and this is the French defense, the Steinitz-Boleslavsky variation after knight f3. And bishop e3. And so this position, very thematic in the French defense. Black is going to be putting a lot of pressure on white's center on the dark squares. Probably going to play f6 later. And in the meantime, white is going to say, I've got a space advantage and superior development. White's going to develop a good deal faster. So black decides to play this line with an early capture. It's just a little bit clearer. And the main point here, we can see he captures. Now he can bring the bishop out to an active square. He didn't want to develop it to e7 as in other lines. So white with queen d2. And this is all very standard stuff. White is definitely going to try to attack on black's kingside. Black's going to try to attack on the queenside. So a6, this is a slow move, but he wants to play b5, and white has three pieces covering the square. So he didn't feel like sacking the pawn. And so h4, you might think this is just an attacking move, but this is actually a really nice move. I really like this line. I've seen a couple different GMs playing it with this h4 idea. I think Anand played this as well in the 90s. And so black decides to exchange and play b5. So he's clarifying things in the center. He exchanged also to play b5. Now the knight's not on c6 anymore. And so white now plays rook h3, and this is the line that I'm talking about. So this is part of the h4 idea, is part of the plan to attack, obviously. But now the rook on the third rank is suddenly a monster. It's one of the best pieces in the game. It can defend the king. It can attack against black as well. And so black plays b4. This is a tempting move, and sometimes you'll see players go knight e2, but I think the best standard reply in this opening for white is to play knight a4. And so you get kind of scared because you think the knight is going to get trapped out here. But the reality is that black probably won't have time to do that. You should be able to find counterplay in the center before he gets at the knight on a4. And so why it's so important, we see black takes. And now we can see the knight is covering the critical squares in the game. b6 and c5. What does black want to do? Right? He wants to attack. He probably wants to open the position up on the queen side. What does white want to do? He wants to play on the king side. And so the knight here is strangling black's position. If queen a5, simply b3. White has absolutely no problem at all. The knight's not going anywhere. We might see something like this happen. Usually there's even some ideas. You can play c3 here. This is just a sample line. Let's say king over. And even here we can see black's attack is not going really anywhere, and white is going to be able to open the king side very easily. So just a sample idea. The knight on a4 is just fine. So black plays f6. I like this by short. This is definitely smoother than the plan we just saw with that queen a5 idea. And so f6, very thematic. I mean, maybe he could have played bishop b7 first, but he does put some very strong pressure on white's center. Kasparov snatches the b4 pawn, so it's very imbalanced now. But you got to understand, as the position opens up as well, white has much better development. He's got a lot more pieces in the game. Black really only has his knight in the game, whereas white has the queen, two rooks, and a knight. So here, black captures. And this is the point of white's idea. He's not trying to give these pawns away. Plays queen d6. And so it's very uncomfortable because the knight can't develop to the queen side. If the rook goes to b8, the queen's going to be hitting it. And if he goes over here, white is going to be able to take either way. He can take the queen, he can take here, he can even take with the queen. White is just going to have a better position. I mean, let's just say he takes here. You know, white's game looks very nice here with c4. The rook is just chilling on the third rank. So queen d6 is a really cool line by Kasparov. I really like it because it's very uncomfortable for black. I mean, white is all of a sudden just all over him. He can't move any pieces. And he's attacking e6, ready to play c4, and backing up the pawn on e5, where he'd be up a pawn. Black plays queen f6. I think this is probably the best reply. And here f5. So this is another point of Kasparov's idea. So if he takes, white is going to be winning a rook. So that's going to be game over. And if he takes with the queen, it took me a second to figure this one out, but rook f3 is pretty dominating. And in fact, this is game over. So wherever the queen goes, let's say queen g4, it's a pretty active square he's going to take. And just simply knight b6. And it's hard to believe, but black is going to be losing. That's it. You know, these checks, it doesn't do anything. And the rook is just trapped. It can't go here. If it goes to a7, I mean, you're just going to lose a piece. So pretty cool idea by Kasparov, going back. This all started with queen d6 and now f5. And the queen can't take. This is the line we just looked at, where this knight to b6 idea, the knight's too good. So, okay, we've established with f5, we know what white wants to do, right? He's obviously, he wants to undermine e6, and in doing, he'll be undermining d5, and even kicking the knight to a bad square to get his knight in. So this f5 idea with queen d6 is very dangerous. Black plays queen h6, so he throws a little check, and now he can take with the rook. And so it looks like black is he's out of trouble. And he's got a solid extra pawn, and even better than the extra pawn, he's got big pawns in the center. But white, this queen d6 is so uncomfortable. And just with the pressure on these pawns here, you know, black's not out of the clear yet. Kasparov plays rook f3. What's black's best piece? It's definitely the rook. So he trades it. Takes here. And now he can't take this pawn. He runs into check, and everything just collapses for black. So that's what white's up to. He traded off black's best piece. Black plays queen f6, so he's trying to get the queen back to at least defend his back rank. Now bishop h3. So let's think here. White is down one pawn. Black has nice pawns in the center if he can keep them, but they're tough to keep right now. Black's king looks pretty safe, but oh yeah, white's got these terrible pawns on the king side. But in compensation, black, he's got a very uncomfortable position. He's only got 2 pieces developed, where we can see white has all 4 pieces developed. So, you know, very interesting attack here with Kasparov. He trades off the rooks, which takes time away from his attack, but now he's continuing to pile on the threats. c4 is another threat. It's very uncomfortable for black. So black plays king f7. I mean, this makes sense. You know, knight f8. Again, it just allows knight b6. The knight can't move. So king f7 is forced. This knight cannot go anywhere. And now c4. Again, very logical. I mean, this is just makes too much sense. I mean, bring more pieces into the attack. And I think here the idea is to play c5 and march the c-pawn, and that would be game over. So c4 is dangerous stuff. He takes it. Now knight c3. So now he's bringing the knight back into the attack. Knight b6 is no longer threatened, but knight e4 is, and this is very dangerous. Obviously, we can see black's pieces. The bishop is just still so tied down. You know, this was like a very long-term attack by Kasparov. It definitely wasn't clear. A lot of positions he was down a pawn, but he had this kind of initiative, and black just could never get untangled. Very interesting sacrifice. So queen e7. Okay, white definitely doesn't want to trade, right? That's an easy decision. He can move with tempo. He doesn't want to trade. So now rook b8. Okay, Black is actually getting some counterplay. He might even be able to play queen b4 or a3, but white plays knight e4. So he can't quite move his queen yet. It looks like he'd be in some trouble here. It's just not going to work, and it's easy to defend for white right now. So probably something along those lines. Just not quite yet. So knight e4. It looks like black might be able to get some play though if he can get out. But white is threatening knight d6 check. So if here, knight d6, and you're just winning a piece. So he plays knight b6 to defend the bishop. Should also point out bishop b7 is met by knight d6, and again the piece is just going to get lost. So material isn't everything. In this position, black is up 2 pawns. Although look at his pawn structure, it's disgusting. So knight e4, I mean, this is not good. White is maybe thinking rook d6. A lot of pressure on e6. A lot of pressure on the bishop with knight d6 coming. So knight b6 seems to be the only move to not lose a piece. But now Kasparov, he transfers the pressure from the e6 pawn, from the queen side, on black's lack of development, and he plays knight g5. And so this is really what I liked about the game. It's like, okay, he gets the probably good preparation at home, plays that f5 move and queen d6 and all that. But now the way Kasparov finished the game was very impressive. So it's very forcing moves. Almost every move he's been bringing the bishop in. He's playing c4, he brings the knight all the way from a4 to g5 very quickly, combined with the active bishop. Meanwhile, black hasn't been able to move. It's been so many threats. So after knight g5, he goes king g8, now queen e4. So again, it's a threat. It's not about this pawn on e5. It's about breaking through on focal points. This forces g6. Okay, so that's a weakness, first of all. Now, like rook g1 and h5 is very strong. But now he just takes on e5. Take one pawn back, but it's not about the pawn. It's about the weaknesses and crashing through to black's king. So now more pressure on e6. So you see rook b7, just trying to defend. Honestly, I mean, the position is so clumsy because now white has so much pressure on e6. He's going to win that pawn back, but it's not about the pawn. It's about going after mate. And, black can't move. He's paralyzed. I mean, look at white's attack. It just all crashes through because he has the perfect coordination. So okay, so rook b7, he's trying to defend. White plays rook d6. He didn't even take this. Obviously, he doesn't want to trade. That's insane. But I mean, even in this position, material's equal, but maybe it's not so clear. And this is probably what black was going for, something like this. Although it's very complicated. I mean, this check, stuff like this, I mean, this is very far from clear. The pressure on d1, the rook's hanging, the knight's hanging, and black's king's loose. So, interesting stuff. But Kasparov, after queen e5, rook b7, instead of taking the pawn we just looked at, he played rook d6. Ups the pressure against the knight, against the pawn, and now bishop takes e6 is a deadly move. In the game, black tries c3. I don't think there's any defense here. Takes with the bishop. Obviously, black can't just move into checkmate, so he takes the bishop. And after rook takes, black resign. Yeah, I mean, he's just lost here. He can try to sack, but there's no checks. And, I mean, what else can he do? I mean, in this position, it just doesn't seem like black even has enough. Queen takes would be an option. Or probably just rook takes. I mean, this is pretty simple, right? I mean, rook takes, knight a3 check, king c1. This is a cool line. And takes with the queen. And, I mean, white's just up a piece. He's up a queen. I mean, that's going to be an easy win. So, in the game, to go back a few moves after a couple of captures, in this position, black resigned because he just doesn't, he's going to lose his queen. I mean, like, whatever he does, rook e8 is coming. Even knight c4, it just loses. I mean, it just doesn't work. So, a very impressive game by Kasparov. Honestly, this is kind of how he always got the better of short. He had good preparation, and especially with the white pieces, and he would just put it out there and make sure it solved so many problems at the board. Really a good example of why Kasparov was so good. I mean, he wasn't scared to sacrifice, and he was backed up by good preparation always. Once he got the initiative, every move he's bringing a new piece in, bringing a new threat in. And meanwhile, Black, he never even got all his pieces developed. The entire game, we look, he never even developed his bishop. The rook and queen, it's really picturesque how Kasparov, once he got the slightest initiative, would just crush it. So this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and thanks for tuning in.